The Detroit Lions have selected a player. Welcome to Jason Sports Detroit Lions News Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Chap. We're going to be talking about this. This is just a raw reaction video. We'll have a full podcast after the whole draft is done so we can go through it and everything. We're not going to overreact to any picks. I know there's a lot of people that are overreacting to picks in the comment section of Detroit Lions News Podcast Facebook page. So it's an interesting time for some of those guys. But when you talk about the Detroit Lions, they did pick Tyleek Williams from the Ohio State University. Tyleek Williams is a 6'3", 334-pound defensive tackle who has his prospect grade, when you look at NFL.com, says will eventually be plus starter. So there's a plus right there. His production score was third among defensive tackles in this year's draft. His athleticism score was 10th overall, and his total score was third overall. Was he the best player? Here's his player bio. In 2021, he was an honorable mention All Big Ten player, Big Ten Conference player, playing 12 games as a reserve, 16 tackles, 6.5 tackles for a loss, and it was 5 sacks and 2 PBUs. 2022, honorable mention All Big Ten, played in 13 games as a reserve, 21 tackles, 2.5 tackles for a loss, and 1 sack and 2 PBUs. Third, 2023, he was a third team All Big Ten, tied for the team lead in tackles for loss with 10, played in all 13 games with 12 starts, 54 tackles, 10 tackles for loss. He had 3 sacks and 5 PBUs as a defensive tackle. Last year, he made the third team All Big Ten again, started 13 games for the national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, 46 tackles, 8 tackles for a loss with 2.5 sacks, PBU. He missed 3 games due to injury. When you look at Pro Football Focus and you talk about what Pro Football Focus is saying, and you say, what does Pro Football Focus say about Tyleek Williams? Well, here's the thing about Tyleek Williams. A lot of people are going to sleep on him for his pass rush grade. I'm going to tell you that right now. Pass rush grade, if you like the Pro Football Focus ranks, it's not the greatest. It's really not. His Pro Football Focus pass rush grade was 59.8, which is not good, but he is an elite run defense guy. And what he does the best is, when I watched Ohio State this year, he pushed the pocket. He pushed the pocket. And I think one of the most damning things about the Detroit Lions last year was how much depth they had at the defensive line position. And you can't get enough of these guys. Who's to say, you're already going to miss a Lee McNeil for what, half the season? If this guy can come in and give you some good minutes, he can keep the tread off DJ Reader. You can keep Levi Onwuzurike out there. Josh Pascal is going to rotate in there. Mekhi Wingo will be back. It tells you everything about what Brett Holmes was thinking. Now, when the NFL.com ranks him third as the total score in the combined defensive tackle rank, you got to take it into equation. Now, what is the weaknesses of Mr. Tyleek Williams? He pops up tall and loses pad level at the point. Shorter arms allow blockers to crowd his frame. Hit or miss holding his ground against double teams. Needs better handwork to neutralize opponent's pass rush. Lacks length and lateral side slide for quick counters for an edge. His strengths are a girthy lower body with big meaty hands. This is what NFL.com is saying. Explosive and violent in initial stages of block take on. Punch and release moves leaves blocker falling forward. Does a terrific job of locating runners and tackling his gaps. Works laterally with blocks to stay solid in gaps on stretch plays. Enough snap quickness and know how to get in the edges. Adequate foot quickness for twist game success. So here's what I want you to look at. When you think about Tyleek Williams, you got to think about two things. If you go to the playoffs, who are you going to go against? Who are you going to go against? You're going to go against Saquon Barkley, most likely, for the Philadelphia Eagles, and they can run the ball, and they like to run it up the middle. And you got a guy who's going to be beefy and take up a lot of space. He's a great run defender. His Pro Football Focus run stop rate was 7.8, which is elite grade. Um, and look, he played most of his time over the B gap and that nose tackle. And his best games this year were against Iowa, a team that likes to run, Oregon, a team that likes to run, Penn State, Michigan, Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame. If you ask me, going against a team like Texas, where they'll have probably 14 guys drafted in the NFL and having a good game, playing Michigan, another team that is, was better than their record indicated in terms of NFL talent. Oregon, playing Oregon twice, and he was better the second time around. The one thing that strikes me with Tyleek Williams is he's very smart. His football IQ is very good. And I think what people need to understand is this: when you talk about the Detroit Lions, and it's from Brad Holmes, it's from Dan Campbell. When you talk about the Detroit Lions, what do you always say? You talk about grit, you talk about determination, and you talk about being a willful winner. And when you look at what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have assembled in Detroit in 4 short years, and you look back at some of their drafts, and I'll put it up on the screen. Look, they've drafted extremely well over the last 4 drafts. Matter of fact, The Athletic ranked them the third best roster in the NFL in 4 years. You know who the two best rosters were? A general manager who's been there for years, and Howie Roseman, and another team in Baltimore who has been a perennial winner. Look, there is a need for edge, but you don't take a need just because you need it. You take what's best available, what Brad Holmes thinks is best available. And if when Brad Holmes takes something best available, this is what got you players like Kirby Joseph. This is what got you players like St. Brown, Derek Barnes. This is what got you a guy like Ali McNeil. You drafted 2 defensive tackles back to back, Levi Onwuzurike and Ali McNeil. And Ali McNeil was arguably the better player. He got the bigger contract extension from Brad Holmes. I say this without saying this because I think a lot of people are going to and talk about this draft pick, and they're going to be like, we needed an edge. We needed a guy like Mike Green. Well, Mike Green didn't get taken in the first round. Or we needed Will Johnson was there. What Adam Schefter reported during the draft was he had a serious knee injury. And 32 teams passed up on those guys. I hate to say this without saying this, but there's 10 good teams in the NFL. 10 smart general managers, maybe 15 smart general managers. Those are usually the guys that pick at the bottom of the round, like the bottom of the first round. And they didn't take a guy like Will Johnson. And you always wondered last year, if you watch Michigan, why was Will Johnson not playing? And then you watch him and you're like, okay, Will Johnson's still not playing. People attribute it to a turf toe, but he's still not playing. Mike Green, there's character concerns. And what did Brad Holmes say on character? He said this. He said, in terms of character evaluation, I wish it was as easy as seeing the headline, Holmes said. But there's so much more depth and detail and research that's involved. It's literally, I tell our scouts, in terms of character, it's year round. It's the house you've got to build year round. It leads all the way up to the draft, really. I've always said it's a case by case. Everything that you may read may not be actually what happened, and that's actual details of it or whatever the case is. But that's just it. It's a case by case, but it's a lot of depth and a lot of research. And a guy like Mike Green, 32 teams passed on him. You know, I look at a guy like Mike Green, I'm getting kind of mad because I look at a guy like Mike Green, and he has so much talent, so much talent. Why are teams passing on him? There's obviously something there. And when you look at the draft and you look who's still available for the Detroit Lions going into, their second round pick, there's still a lot of edge rushers available. Um, just a ton of edge rushers available. And I look at a guy like Josiah Stewart. I look at a guy like Um, if I do a mock draft where it has 3 rounds and we enter the draft and we use the actual picks and we do that all that jazz, we start it. We get to Detroit. Who are the edge rushers that are still available? You got Jared Ivey, who I like. You got Josiah Stewart, Kyle Kennard, Elijah Roberts, Jack Sawyer, and Ashton Gillott. There's a lot of depth at this position, but I will say this, and I say this with all certainty: Brad Holmes has built a really good team in 4 drafts. This is his 5th draft. They went to the NFC Championship. They had the best record in NFC. Unfortunately, with the injuries that you had last year, there was no shot of going to a Super Bowl with the injuries that you had last year. It's just a reality. But the reality of the situation is this: you're getting a guy like Hutchinson back. You'll get a guy like McNeil back at the end of the year. You're going to bring some more guys in the draft. But this guy, Tyleek Williams, he's going to help you in the run game. And what do you talk about when you talk about the run game? You talk about going against Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia. You talk about going to play a guy like Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco. You talk about going to a team like, I mean, let's go around. The NFC South has some good running backs. Bijan Robinson, maybe the Falcons take the next step. You know what I'm saying? You're going to go against good running backs, and you want a good run defense. And it's going to be hard to run the ball against the Detroit Lions very, very much. And especially when Lee McNeil comes back. And they still have an opportunity to draft a guy like an edge player. But I will say this, in my final point, you know, every year there's guys in the draft that everyone loves. The reality of the situation is 60% of the picks will not work out. 60%. Now, Brad Holmes is hitting at an 82.2% clip. And year by year, and it's predicted this year they might have 17 projected starters, not including a kicker, a punter, or anything like that. It shows you year after year, rookies are not asked to contribute right away. It's like you can't really throw a guy in there. And last year there was 25 starters that started on day one. On day one, they started. That shows you that when you draft, it's not for the present. It is not for the present. It's for the future. Most of the time, it's for the future. Now you're gonna get guys that come out like a guy like Hutchinson, who had a great rookie year. A guy like Penei Sewell, who was a great rookie year. You know, you're gonna have a guy like Malcolm Rodriguez who comes from the later rounds who could become, something good for the Detroit Lions. But all in all, you're trying to build a roster from not just now, but into the future. And you're taking the best players that you think are available. And that's what Brad Holmes did today with Tyleek Williams. And I think Tyleek Williams, a lot of people are not going to like the way that he's not a good pass. He's not a pass rusher. He's not known for his pass rushing. But when I look at his statistics over the course of 4 years at Ohio State, I mean, you look at 5 sacks. He had 1 sack, and then he had 3 sacks, and then he had 2.5 sacks. But he gets tackles for loss. He was double-digit tackles for loss nearly every year that he started. I mean, he played 13 games as a reserve. He had 2.5 tackles for a loss. In the first year, he had 6.5 tackles for a loss as a reserve. Last 2 years, he missed 3 games last year. He's had 18 tackles for a loss in 2 years. I mean, that just shows you what Tyleek Williams can do. And I think it's a good pick. But I know there's a lot of people that don't think it's a good pick. I just want to see what the rest of the draft holds for the Detroit Lions. And as always, we'll see what Brett Holmes has cooking. But I think this is a good pick, and I think it will end up pretty good for the Detroit Lions, especially when you think about who they have to go against to get where they want to get. Just think about that. We'll see you in the next video to talk more Detroit Lions football, and we'll see you on the podcast, Detroit Lions News podcast, after the draft, probably Sunday morning. You'll get it in your feed, and we'll see you in the next podcast video as we talk about more Detroit Lions, the draft coverage here on JC Sports.